All right, getting everybody in. Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everybody a minute to get their audio connected and get settled in your seats. Ready for the show. It's a joke, and I know you're all laughing on me. So for housekeeping, do please keep your lines on mute. We'll have a Q&A session towards the end of our call today. So you'll be more than welcome to open your line at that point or add to the chat throughout the session. And we're going to get started with Ashley and her team here today. So Ashley, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, I don't know if I would consider us a show, maybe a comedy, but whatever we are today, it was free, and we're definitely very, very excited that you have given us some time out of your day to further discuss ReSkill Arkansas and some IT careers and kind of how our nonprofit organization can help you achieve those goals. Kind of looking at the plan or agenda, we're going to go into for some of the new folks, who is ACDS, what is the ReSkill Arkansas program. We're going to jump into some of the common job titles or career paths within the IT information technology space. And then, of course, the main goal today is to be able to facilitate any type of questions. There is no dumb question or incorrect type of question. We want to definitely learn from each other. And I'm sure if you have the question, there's another participant that also has the same question and answer. And kind of jumping into who we have on the call today. So myself, I'm Ashley French, Director of Talent Acquisition. I also have not only my boss, but our Director of Apprenticeship and probably the king of apprenticeships within the state of Arkansas and even the Carolinas, Lonnie Emmerd. He comes from a technical leadership background back at Blue Cross Blue Shield, so he will definitely be able to answer all your technical questions and give you insight on kind of from a hiring manager, and he actually works one-on-one with the employers of the state of Arkansas. And then we also have Katie Frazier on our talent acquisition team at ACDS. She will be our question moderator extraordinaire. So feel free to direct any questions as we go in the chat, either to a direct message to her or out for everyone to see. We definitely want this to be an interactive conversation. Give us some virtual high fives or hellos, thumbs up, thumbs down, hopefully not too many downs, but feel free to interact with us. And I see there's probably about 40% of names that I recognize, so apologize if this is a repeat from what you heard last week, but ACDS, so we are Arkansas Center for Data Sciences. We were established about 18 months ago, and we are a nonprofit organization that really has the mission of building and retaining tech talent to the state of Arkansas. Lonnie and his team, really works hard on educating employers to not hire based on years of experience in a work setting, but really look at the capability and potential in hiring someone that with the right training, with the right mentorship, can successfully succeed in an IT career. Kind of jumping into ReSkill Arkansas. So ReSkill Arkansas is a partnership between ACDS and the Office of Skills Development and the Office of Division of Workforce Services. So they are really who to thank for the funding for this program. And essentially, the purpose of ReSkill Arkansas is to support and offer some technical training to anyone within the state of Arkansas that wants to pursue an IT career. Kind of looking at the steps of the process. If you're on this call, you have already successfully completed step 1 and 2, which is complete an online application with us and complete our assessment. Kind of the next step is, a little, it's going to vary on kind of where you're at in regards to your skills and abilities, and kind of where you're at on knowing what career track you're interested in. You know, our recruiting team is going to reach out to you and do kind of an initial, it's almost a phone interview. You know, our goal is really to establish kind of where you're at in regards to your interest and really knowledge of what IT careers are out there. I talked to some candidates that are very quick to say, you know, I want to be a developer. I've been, you know, putting together a few apps or games out on GitHub. But then I talk to individuals that really don't know what areas to focus on. And so we're going to, in that phone conversation, to kind of talk through what you're interested in and kind of see if we can point you to the right initial pre-apprentice training, which is the online self-paced training opportunities that we have through a partnership with the University of Arkansas Global Campus. And then, you know, kind of after completing kind of initially that first or second course, we're going to reach out to you again to further discuss how to get you job ready. And typically that's going to start with an updated resume. And we specifically want to touch base with you after you've completed at least 1 to 2 of those courses, because at that point, hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what you're interested in, or it could be what you're not interested in. Maybe you decided to take the CompTIA hardware online training, and maybe you've determined that that's not really an area of interest, and you want to pursue something more on the database development side of the house. So we're going to help you kind of tailor that resume towards your area of interest. We're going to give you some feedback on how to nail those interviews with employers. We're also going to have actually Katie and Michael on our team host a kind of job search tips and tricks on how to ensure that when you're applying direct out to employers or companies out on their Indeed posting, that your resume has a higher chance of being selected for an interview, with the end result of hopefully getting that job offer. So kind of the end of the process is really going to be a partnership. You know, we have a great database of employers and companies in Arkansas that we partner with. We will absolutely share your resume directly with them. In addition to you as the job seeker kind of owning some of that search, to where, you know, the greatest success is really only accomplished when we're both out there marketing your resume to employers. Lonnie, anything that I didn't highlight or touch quite yet?
I think you covered that extremely well, Ashley. I mean, I'm looking forward to diving into some details today with the folks on the call, but up to now, I think you clearly explained kind of where they find themselves and what's going on in preparation for them to, you know, potentially be in this situation where they're being interviewed for a job in one of these IT professions. So looking forward to the rest of this. Thanks so much.
And again, feel free to chat or send any messages directly to Katie as well, and we can absolutely chime in. But kind of there's a few different tracks that are kind of the most frequent entry points into the computer science or information technology field. Probably the most well-known career path or job title is going to be a developer or a programmer. You know, I would probably say, Lonnie, you know, out of the companies that we talk to from a demand side of the house, would you agree that this is probably number one?
Absolutely.
And so a developer, or it's often called a programmer, you know, companies are going to title these a little different. It could be a software developer, application developer, could be a software engineer. There's different variations where it could be front end, back end, a web developer. Typically, you know, when the term web developer is used, that's going to be using a little more of the graphic design kind of creative component. one piece of development that I really didn't know until I did some technical recruiting is the testing and the bugging. So if you are someone that really enjoys problem solving, details, finding the flaws in things, the developer or software engineer track potentially could be for you.
Ashley, as I add to what you're saying here, so this was my entry point into a career in information technology, was as a programmer, right? And you hear these terms, and some of you on here may have been doing some of your own research. You notice there's some resources that are shown down here. I've spent a lot of time with an organization called code.org, which has tried to prepare all kinds of things from, young children that are even in elementary school and middle school and so forth, and beyond, for even adults to be able to very quickly identify with the idea of everything in this world today pretty much runs on software, right? Software drives the world. And so whether, you think about folks, and I'll use this example, a games developer, that really means that there's somebody who's kind of creating their own specifications, and they're writing code in a particular language. You notice some languages to know up here. We were not exhaustive in this. We're just showing a number of things that are somewhat common in the industry, but just realize there are hundreds of languages by which software is written, and it basically tells the instructions to the computer, as you may have already identified. But the important part of this is that, as Ashley has identified, and I think Kristen did so well a few weeks ago, that as you're trying to identify where you find your niche and what you would really be good at and interested in, because if you love this, it won't even seem like work. And that's the way it was for me. I wrote applications and wrote development for a petroleum company when I first started. It was Amoco. They're not even around anymore. It's BP. But just recalling those days when I first worked on what was called the land property database, you notice that I use the word database, and later we're going to talk about a different function or a different occupation called a database administrator or a data technician or even data analyst. But my role was certainly on a team with other people, where I was given certain specifications to write a piece of software using, at that time, this is way back a lot of years ago, COBOL, which you see it on here. That certainly has not become as prevalent today, although still most businesses of large scale have not totally eliminated the common business-oriented language, COBOL, even if they have actually COBOL generators that drive that. And the reason I bring that up is because there is a significant amount of IT occupational work that's in software, but you're actually maintaining existing applications. Walmart, Tyson Foods, Simmons Bank, Blue Cross. I could go down the list of folks that are hiring people that won't necessarily come in and be like a games developer starting with a blank sheet of paper and say, create this logic to make this game work, so that you got all these options for the game player who's using their console and deciding, or their phone, and making decisions about which room to enter and what color should this look like and what's the next prize to be gained and how do you keep track of points and levels. That's all logic, right? But logic for me was determining which particular person was going to get paid a royalty because they owned the land that Amoco was going to build a well. And actually every time we sold any kind of product that was based on revenue that came out of the ground and was refined and sold, basically that person who owned that land got a royalty. So, that might sound like math, accounting, but it was all of that. But yet I was in the IT division writing the software that had to take what somebody else said, this is the way we're going to do it. And I had to write the code that made that work. And so, Ashley, you mentioned testing. Guarantee you, my first go round, I'd write stuff. I thought I had it all covered. I'd run a test, and guess what? It didn't work. I'd get a code back that said, this is my error. And then you'd go debug that and you'd fix it. And if you like that kind of stuff where you're kind of being challenged by the fact that you want to get something right, there is an exact answer. It's ones and zeros. It's got to come up with a solution that works. And you have the chance to be the creator of that particular piece of code. that was just one piece of a very large system. And that's what I wanted you to understand today, is that you can be an individual working on a small application and developing it yourself, an ordering system or what have you, or you could be working on software that's part of a big architecture and part of larger systems. And most likely that's going to be the case. And so I just wanted to highlight that for you. There's different languages that now, as Ashley mentioned, you talk about front end and back end, and then there's a middleware layer. The front end is typically the things that have to do with the user. That means somebody who's using the app on their phone, they're using the system as an employee of a company. They have certain things they have to get done in their work, and you've written the code that's making this computer application solve their problem or meet their needs to either input data, process that data, or basically report on that data and be able to go back and try to learn from it. And so that front end is very critical on visual, creativity and user experience and the user interface. The back end is usually where all the functionality is. That's where the logic of any kind of mathematical or accounting or any kind of processing that somebody in the business says, we got to make sure that we process this. So if you placed an order online, I just did last night with Land's End for my wife. And guess what happened, right? I put the wrong size in there. And so then I quickly tried to find out if they could make that adjustment. And, before I could even call them, the order was already processed, packaged, and was on its way being shipped. So somebody wrote all that code to make all that happen behind the scenes. But the online ordering for me was simple. I thought the chat to change it was simple, but it wasn't. I mean, it was simple for me, but they were so fast that it was already done. So, front end, back end. And then the reason I mentioned middleware is that there is a lot of stuff. I'll use a term that you may hear about when we talk about the hardware side, and that is with the operating systems. Things where whether something runs, today we use a term in the cloud, meaning that it doesn't sit on a particular person's personal computer, or it doesn't sit on a desktop. It's being processed somewhere else. And with the internet and with all of our high-speed technology, the fact is databases are all around the world. And when you write code, where it's stored and how it gets run is fascinating to me, and I hope it is to you. So as you think about what you may enjoy, the working style, writing code can happen from anywhere. You're going to deposit that code somewhere. Ashley mentioned GitHub is a great place to practice. A lot of people who do open source development projects, which we can share with you how you might be able to get engaged in something like that. That gives you a chance to write your stuff and see if it works. And if it does, it ends up in some of these projects. We'll help you with some of that as you move forward in your progress. So for the sake of time, Ashley, I'm going to stop there on this because we got some other occupations to talk about. But I hope that depth of understanding of how that related to me, how it could relate to you, and some of the different variations of where you might be working and for whom, small company versus large. Okay.
I do want to touch on a great question from Matt. So, asking about kind of where to start, free or inexpensive courses. There are a ton of free courses out there, specifically out on GitHub. So GitHub is a really important thing to remember for anyone that is targeting the developer programmer track. For, as a previous IT recruiter within the telecom industry, I consistently would get feedback from hiring managers for a software engineer or developer one position that they didn't care what their work history was. All they wanted to see was their GitHub profile and see examples of their work or their project. So if you don't have any work history, do not be discouraged. Focus more on, examples of projects. Maybe there's a nonprofit organization that you volunteer with. They may need a website or a assistance with, some type of digital media out there. So Matt, in our follow-up email, I'll make sure to highlight additional free resources. Coding Academy is another great resource, and Coursera.
Yeah. Hey, one other thing, Matt, that I saw your chat, and rather than type it in, I'm going to just explain that what's the difference between some of your exposure to these languages and doing some coding as part of your pre-apprentice or this training does not determine whether or not you're going to get hired to a company who may be using a different platform or a different language. Those are not necessarily connected. What we want to help you demonstrate is that you've proven that you can have a tool on your tool belt and you can put logic with that language and solve a problem. And what's going to happen in your apprenticeship, when you come on board with a company and they say, oh, well, you've practiced or you've done things and demonstrated that you know Java, but we're a .NET shop. No problem, because guess what? Part of the apprenticeship training is going to teach you the .NET language. It's going to teach you that Windows kind of environment and platform that is very Microsoft oriented, whereas maybe what you learned on was not that. That's okay. That's okay. Eventually, as a developer, you'll walk away years down the road and go, it doesn't matter. Hand me the tool. I can learn the language and I know how to do it. And that's what we want you to feel comfortable with, is that whether you learned in one language, but yet somebody's going to hire you and they do something completely different, that's okay, because the apprenticeship training will cover that. Okay.
Great question. All right, so kind of moving to our next job title or career track, tech support and IT operations. So if you're out on Indeed, you know, what type of job titles would that fall within? Probably the most common is going to be IT help desk or desktop support. Sometimes you may see, you know, a LAN desktop or even a network operations, a NOC analyst. In general, you know, these individuals are going to be working typically within a ticketing system. I think we've all reached out to AT&T or some type of help desk and, you know, kind of gone through the automated prompts, and eventually you get to talk to someone that is a technical resource that's going to be able to help your, you know, hardware or some type of system support. So in general, they're going to maintain and keep the health of a company's network and systems from a hardware and a software standpoint. Think of, so, you know, large organizations, you know, aren't going to rely on an employee to individually update their browsers or the latest version of Office 365. There's going to be a IT kind of network support team behind the scenes that's going to push that out kind of automatically and support them. You know, they're also going to oversee some disaster recovery plans. So if the system crashes, where is all of the data being stored? So they're going to do some technical assistance, troubleshooting. Often you could be, you know, logging in to someone's computer remotely and kind of walking through their issue. So since they typically only deal with customers or employees when something is wrong, usually you have to have some pretty good interpersonal customer service skills, being able to, you know, kind of build rapport with that person that may be upset or frustrated, and kind of identify their problem and walk them through a solution. So if you are, I love, so Kristen Moore is the head recruiter for the ReSkill Arkansas program, and comes from a very technical, was previously a programmer out at Dillard's. And she put, if building the coolest, most hardcore computer excites you, then this could be a career for you. If you're typically the go-to person that your family calls for tech support or installing a new router or your internet connectivity, you know, there is a correlation to often help desk folks, you know, enjoy breaking things and putting them back together just for fun. You know, it also is a really cool occupation because it gives you exposure to other career paths. So for example, you know, you're getting a lot of exposure to network protocols and IT security basics. So it's also kind of a good feeder into a career path into cybersecurity or IT security. And, you know, I think another key thing to point out for this career track is, with COVID, companies had to immediately, overnight, support a remote workforce. And so I'm seeing definitely an increase of a need for more tech support type roles to be able to ensure that someone's employees that are using a VPN or a virtual private network, is secure and monitored.
Actually, I'm not sure that there's much I can add to that from a general overview. You hit on every important aspect there. I think another, kind of just give you a real world example. And this is actually somebody who's become employed as an apprentice at a company in Little Rock. And to kind of meet all the points you made, Ashley, is that person didn't have much background at all in the IT space. Had been trained up a little bit with the potential of understanding what these options are, much like yourselves. And that person was able to join a company as an IT generalist, which meant that company was not big. They had about 30 people. They do some very significant work, and they had 2 folks doing very significant IT related stuff, but they were covering everything from day-to-day operations to cyber to data analytics to helping the company really create kind of their architecture for the future. And to have those folks having to be responsible for some of the things Ashley just mentioned, which was break fix, something happened, installing new software when the new version arrived, all those things. So this person who went through our ACDS apprenticeship program got hired by that company. And within 2 weeks of them being hired is when COVID basically hit. And we heard from their management team that without that individual, Tim was his name, being on board as an IT generalist, even though he was still learning the skills in the midst of the training, was actually readying himself to be able to respond. And guess what? They felt like they wouldn't have made it through COVID as a company without him being able to take on that day-to-day responsibility. And so the on-the-job training that was coupled with the classroom experience was a demonstration of the fact that, hey, Tim said, if I can do this, anybody can do this, right? He had a very good aptitude, but he learned in the midst of it all, and they attribute a lot of their success to the fact that he came in and was able to pick up on the learning and then apply it very quickly and do those things that were so necessary related to network administration things. He was troubleshooting some of the desktops, all the things that Ashley mentioned that fall into this. And just know that a person following this path, if you like to dabble and so forth, I mean, some of the courses have you, have a computer to take apart and put it back together, right? And there's just a lot of options there that lead all the way through. But knowing, I use a phrase here in life, basically, that everything's connected to everything. But in terms of IT infrastructure, whether that's in the cloud, wireless, or whether it's fiber and it's hardwired, it's definitely true that everything is connected to everything. And if it's not connected, then in some way, by identification of a node or the fact that there's the right protocol, hate to use those words, but there's something that recognizes something else is out there. Just like when I just recently bought a new sound bar for my TV. So think about things like media and so forth. Somebody had to write software in there that connected my Samsung soundbar to my Samsung TV. It didn't just happen magically. A lot of people think, oh, that's just magic, right? It's not. There's things that have been pre-written on those devices that are software that go out and look for a signal, and it recognizes it and said, oh, there it is. And then all of a sudden, what do you get? A transfer of sound from your TV to your soundbar. That's the kind of network stuff that is all involved here. There's a lot of media, whether that's video, audio. Think of all the things where home systems require people with expertise. There's just not enough folks out there that know how to do this stuff. I mean, with serious home systems, not just doing what I did last night. But what I'm saying is that this encompasses so many things. So if you really like that side of our society, that really everything is got software, but everything's connected, everything's a device here or there. This is for you if you like that environment to be able to not only connect stuff, make it work, but also troubleshoot it, problem solve, and basically think about big picture architecture. Eventually, this career field leads to the design of systems, right? The design of networks, the design of architectures for any size company. So I'll leave you with that, Ashley.
All right. And just to kind of point out, to kind of add it all together to those of you that have not selected what course to move forward with within the ReSkill University of Arkansas Global Campus offering. So there's kind of two key courses that we recommend, if this is an area of interest to start with, and that would be it's the CompTIA A+. CompTIA is a very kind of industry known certification training. Now this course doesn't result in a certification, but it gives you a great foundation of what some of the key components are. In addition to the networking course. And again, those are all self-paced. We've had job seekers knock those out in a week. I'd probably say on average, it takes about at least 2 weeks per course. We do have a limitation on you can only select one course at a time. But as of now, we are seeing candidates be able to move forward and then select their second and even third course. And then kind of two other noteworthy online resources. The cybrary.com is a really cool learning website, and they have a system administrator course. And then, of course, anything Google is great and well known from a resume standpoint. But Google has an IT support certification out on Coursera. All right, and jumping to data analyst. Data analytics in general is such a hot career right now. I think I'd almost say 60% of the candidates I interview say their long-term goal is to be a data scientist. In general, a data analyst is going to help a company make sound business decisions based on supporting data. No longer do we have the executive leadership that are going to say, we're going to move into this direction because it just feels right. My gut's telling me we need to go this way. Typically, when you're in a business meeting about some type of decision or change in a process or, decision to go to another system implementation, executive leadership is going to ask what type of data you have to support that decision. So companies are looking at, how they can utilize data and visualization and dashboards. So a data analyst is going to take a massive Excel file or raw data from a system and pull it into meaningful trends and analysis. So that could be exporting it into a visualization tool like Power BI. So that's kind of the Microsoft visual tool that makes it all pretty and shows those trends and charts and dashboards. There's also Tableau. Tableau is another great tool to utilize from taking kind of that raw data into meaningful charts and graphics. So typically, a data analyst is going to be super detail oriented. If your friends maybe have called you a little OCD, could be an area of interest. If, maybe in, high school, you took a statistics course. If that wasn't the worst thing on the planet and you kind of enjoyed it, may want to be within the data analyst track. If you are just super organized and maybe you keep your your household budget in an Excel file just for fun, this may be a career path. And I say that I married someone that is more on the data analyst side and not myself. Recruiters are much more the opposite, very much would prefer just talking. A lot of data kind of scares me. I don't know where to start. But again, if you enjoy working in spreadsheets and numbers and trends and, again, very detail oriented, if you double and triple check things, if you like to count random things like the ceiling tiles, that could be an area of interest. Oh yeah, Michael. So there's a really great movie out there on Netflix that is called Moneyball, and it is a really great example on actually how is it the sports industry is using data, I think. But kind of, you know, if you want to do some research that's maybe, you know, kind of fun and in your Netflix time, check that out. From a job title perspective on, you know, kind of how companies post things out on different job sites, you know, this could be called a data specialist. Sometimes it's even called an IT analyst or a SQL analyst. You know, it could also be called a business analyst. You know, sometimes a business analyst may have kind of a blended duty of, you know, something within data analytics, but also maybe some project management duties as well. You know, kind of key skills to know. Myself, Katie, and Michael typically, you know, really preach that the power of Excel. You know, if you are interested in going into analytics, you know, really challenge yourself to be kind of at that intermediate level to be able to, you know, put together, connect multiple tables, pivot charts, use those kind of intermediate level features, because I think that's what employers want to see in the interview process.
You know, Ashley, you've done a good job with this one again. I'm sorry I had to step away for a minute, but I think the things I would like to add here for folks thinking about this career path is that there's a little overlap of two things here. If you, as individuals on this call that are looking to find your way into this IT occupation, know that you probably come equipped with some domain knowledge. What I mean by that is, if you've spent time in a particular industry already or doing some other type of function, maybe you haven't, but even if there's an area that you're interested in, whether that's healthcare, retail, you know, banking and financial, sports, brewing, I throw that in because we had one of our data analysts in the last apprenticeship cohort worked for Lost 40 Brewing and became the data analyst for them. So what I want to refer to is that you might be thinking about, if you added the technical skills that are part of this pre-apprenticeship training around some of the things that Ashley just mentioned, right? SQL, which is how to work with relational databases and how to find data, right? How to wrangle it. You know, just knowing that there's technology and techniques that, you know, if you learn the tool and you know how to get at data, you're already a step ahead, because some folks would say, I'd sure love to do that. I just don't know how to get to the data. Or then if I get it, I don't know what to do with it. So finding the data, being able to then process that and put it into particular, you know, kind of visualization tools, or you have to know a little bit about some statistics to try to analyze that. But I guess my point that I want to make is that it's a lot more fun to do that in an area of where you have interest. And there are a lot of folks that have been business analysts in a company, and they say, how do I progress in my career? And they move from the business side into IT, into this kind of data analyst, data analytics side of this, because there is the technology capability that's required to do that job. And it can start as understanding relational databases. We do want you to think about that in your courses. You want to understand what it means to have relational database, which is just connecting two separate data things via a key. What is common? How can you take information from one and say, now, how am I going to go get all of the rest of that information about, you know, if you think about brewing, if they say, well, here's this can design, and this is the name we call it. What if I want to go and know how, every bit of the ingredients it takes to make that? Well, all that ingredients is in a whole separate database. So then all of a sudden you make that connection via some key, you go pull that, and then they say, oh, we don't have enough of X, right? Enough yeast, enough something, right? So then they go have to order. So you can imagine that the data drives their ability to, one, order stuff, bring it in, make it, sell it, make money, whatever. So that the data analytics to do that, manually takes forever, right? So the idea is that rather than thinking about somebody manually tracking all that, you write the code in Python, or you use Excel, like was mentioned before, and connect tables and put macros in there. I'm throwing out terms because I want you to know that this has got a nice crossover between really understanding the business and really understanding what it is that the information that drives that business, somebody's got to deal with that. And why not be you, right? As a data analyst, because information, data becomes information, information becomes knowledge, knowledge becomes action. And really that's what drives the business. So to be as close to impacting the business as any IT job can have, this one is right there. And so picking up on these tools, it's things you can practice on your own, and actually, feel very, I see Michael's helping me. A macro is, he's giving you the definition of a macro since I threw that word out there. So please look in the chat for that. But as a data analyst person, you can start out very, kind of introductory as the data wrangler, the data technician, and quickly move through. And as you get more skills around, statistical analysis and writing the code with Python or using visualization tools like were mentioned here, this is one that could excite you if you don't necessarily find yourself wanting to work on the hardware side, or that you don't want to write code all the time. Now, I hope that you're picking the one that makes the most sense, but this is what differentiates this one. Okay, Ashley?
And that reminds me of a conversation earlier today. I believe it was with Crystal on the call, and we were talking about, she was kind of torn between, she's creative, she likes design, and then somehow we kind of stumbled on the blend of marketing analytics. So Lonnie's 100% right on, you may start in kind of a data wrangler type role where you're learning kind of the logic, the syntax, what to do with the data in trends analysis. But you could absolutely transition into a more laser focused type department. Maybe they're looking specifically at shopper behavior, looking at purchasing trends, social media marketing, looking at, all of the data that you can pull just from Facebook or Instagram based on, how many clicks per time, what type of graphic speaks, the most and ultimately drive sales. So just wanted to also point out again that there is a very creative side of analytics, as well, that you could, just depending on what type of data you're working with.
And I don't mean to jump around, but I also saw in the chat that Michael also was differentiating user interface from user experience. And, that's a differentiator even in the development side as well. Somebody can be very tactical and like the details and follow, specifications and write code. That doesn't always make that person creative. A creative person can learn how to write some code, but also is very necessary on the team to determine things like, what's that user interface going to be like? What's the look and feel, the use of color, design, and then that user experience when it comes to functionality. So those are creative things, just like Ashley mentioned, creative as it relates to what you learn from your data and what that triggers in terms of testing the marketplace around designs, around ads, around, as you mentioned, social media. I don't want to repeat what you said, Ashley, but there are plenty of places within the IT occupational spectrum to apply what I call design techniques, right? And creativity. Sometimes it's innovation as opposed to creation, because you're working for something that's already there and you have to kind of put things together like they've never been done before. So I think sometimes that's not, invention more than, it's probably more innovation. But here's another chance within this particular occupation to do that. Okay.
All right, so we are at our final kind of career track to highlight for you guys today, which is IT security or cybersecurity. Again, I think we kind of mentioned due to COVID, the business need to really ensure that your customers' data, that what your employees are accessing, that your system and network are all safe and secure. Phyllis, should we say hi to your coworker of the day. But in general, I typically see a lot of individuals that maybe start in a help desk type role and then get promoted into IT security. That's not saying by any means that you couldn't start out in an IT security position, but in general, I do see that trend of starting in kind of the network operations, really getting to know the behind the scenes, the hardware, the networks, to fully understand how a hacker can access your system. This position also has some really fun testing and threat prevention. I often see in job postings or a job descriptions for IT security or cyber security, there's a preference for military or police department experience. And I actually had to ask one of our managers and better understand why. Well, in general, those are our veterans. They want to serve. They want to get the bad guy and help people out. And so they see that kind of intrinsic need to protect. And that's essentially what you're doing as an IT security person. You're ensuring that whether you're protecting your employees or your company as a whole or your customers, they're going to be very detailed on what type of prevention or processes are put in place if a breach occurs. Sometimes they have to do a little bit of detective work on conducting interviews, whether that's with an internal employee or another third party to see. Constant learning, because, for hackers to be successful, they have to change their hacking abilities and how they're breaching systems. So the IT security field, just like really all of IT, is constant change and learning new technologies.
Ashley, I would add here that, I didn't mention under data analytics this comment, but I'll mention it here for cyber, and it's also true for that as well. Is, we always think about data, we think about the way people connect to systems, the way people check their emails, the way they do their password, establishment. Everything kind of begins to become vulnerable if we don't follow certain protocol or certain things that really are human nature oriented. And that's true in data analytics, with the fact that we always talk about structured data, which is things that can be captured in a database. It's, volumes of actions, transactions, whatever. But we forget sometimes about the learning that goes on in an unstructured way. So unstructured in terms of big data is, people saying things about what they're interested in on the internet. And the next thing you know, somebody wrote the logic to immediately send them a coupon for something. Or if I said to my friend, hey, I think I'm going fishing next weekend, and all of a sudden Bass Pro starts sending me all this stuff. Well, that's kind of, not too invasive. It is in some cases, or can be. But think about a company with all of their particular data, and somebody's inquiring about how to do use some test tools for something, and all of a sudden somebody fishes and sends them something in their email, and they don't even think twice, and all of a sudden they think, wow, that could solve my problem, and they click on it, and the next thing you know, they've entered a virus into the entire company, right? So this idea of vulnerabilities, and somebody who's in information security or cybersecurity, a lot of different names and roles that Ashley mentioned, there's kind of two sides to this. Can you think like somebody who would try to do harm? And are you of the nature and the behavior that you would want to try to then prevent that, right? So we talk about threat prevention. We talk about tracing things. Forensics seems to be a word that was really hot a number of years ago because of CSI, but computer and cyber forensics is big, right? How do you trace once something's happened to where that source was, so that you can prevent it from ever happening again? It's like if somebody robbed your bank because you left the vault door open, would you ever leave the vault door open again, kind of thing. So the mention of this is that most hacking and things that are happening in the cyber world, there's no boundary, right? We would at Blue Cross, and I guarantee you there's companies here that would mention this, we would get 10 to 15,000 attacks from, you know, China and all these countries all around the world. And they're just pinging addresses trying to get into the system to find a way to either get something they can hold somebody, you know, hostage with, you know, malware and various things, or trying to, you know, siphon money at a, you know, half a cent at a time kind of thing. So you can imagine there is a real need here. And from a skills perspective, these are fairly new for people. So, you know, there are some programs in schools, but you're at a real opportunistic place right now, because you can start and leapfrog a whole lot of people as you take these introductory kind of skill building and some of these introductory courses. Even if you started with the A+, you know, Network Plus, and worked into Security Plus, you join at the apprenticeship. If we can find a way to get you in front of those employers, which we will, they hire folks, and then they're going to train you with a lot of these skills to be a cybersecurity professional. Start out as maybe a specialist, an analyst, and work into even more. But these things that Ashley has put on the slide here that you can begin, again, doing on your own. There's a lot of things that if you research that national organizations called NICE and NIST, which are all about cybersecurity training. A lot of what's happening in cyber is a byproduct of the fact that we haven't written code. So back to the developer side of this, think about the developers that don't even think about security when they write the software. That's for every device. It could be something that is responsible for the power grid, as an example, and some particular power pole somewhere, you know, has got software that's determining certain things, and all of a sudden somebody hacks that and shuts down an entire city's power grid, right?
Hey, Lonnie,
Yeah.
while you're kind of on the topic of a combo of developers and cybersecurity, I wanted, Crystal has an interesting question, and it's probably best for you on, can you think of where, you know, pieces of IT security and a web developer would be combined into kind of one job?
Well, Crystal, that's a great question. And it really tells me you're already thinking the way we want you to. There are certain programs that are now changing in terms of teaching people how to write software and write code, and it's called secure software development. And so what that means, whether it's a web project, web application, or whether it's back-end, you know, Java application that's doing functionality and so forth, the idea of writing certain requirements and specifications that are really security software related, built right in, can prevent some of those things. Now, the argument would be, what kind of things do people indicate or put in? And if that's like, you know, gosh, I'll say social security numbers or whatever, what is the encryption that's being built in, right? So cybersecurity, a technique, whether that's, you know, dual authentication, whether that's thing, and you probably experienced some of this as a user, or whether it's the encryption of your password, and there's a whole lot more I could go into there, but think about how that gets introduced on your mobile phone or on your device. That is really that web development combined with the fact that somebody considered that this could be hacked. And so how do you build cybersecurity and all of the prevention techniques into that at the same time? And the answer is yes, that is the expectation in a lot of ways, that somebody doing that work would be taught how to do that and make sure that that code is written that way. So I hope that answers your question. It was a really good question. They are.
So I think it's almost a yes. There's always that potential at the end of the day. But Crystal, I think I would be mindful again of employer demand. You know, how many job opportunities are out there? I would, lean to say there's probably more demand for, on the developer track. Again, and because cybersecurity, IT security is so important, you really do have to know some of the background behind the scenes of the networking. Not to say, don't target any of the, sometimes they call it a SOC analyst. That's kind of what Simmons Bank may call it, as a position to target. But yeah, that is a great question. Well, and since we're on great questions, what other great questions do we have? Katie, did you receive any direct?
I did not. So feel
Oh,
free to send me any direct questions or put them where everyone can see.
yeah, or even unmute yourself.
I like the audience. I see a few names I'd recognize from before, but there's quite a few new ones for me. So.
And special shout out to Phyllis and Sean for being on camera. That definitely helps from a speaker standpoint. But to everyone else, trust me, I understand. You know, sometimes it is not a camera day. I think you have to unmute, Phyllis. But I'm pretty good at reading lips. Maybe some sign language. I know a little.
Okay, how about now?
There you are.
Okay.
Oh, we got Crystal.
So I took the assessment and I haven't heard from anybody, but I really haven't worked in with computers with a company before, and I'm wondering if this is really for me or not, or if that assessment was just trying to be positive to get me off of unemployment or something. But I am interested in it, but I just wonder where I'll fall into any of this actually. So I am a quick learner, and I do try to learn on my own a lot of things that I need to learn, but I don't know. I don't have much of a background in it, so I'm rather
that's all right.
skeptical. You know,
I think it's more of the interest and the willingness to self-learn. You know, again, you know, I come back to from a recruiting standpoint, you know, what employers want to hear or see on a resume outside of work history. And that goes, you know, the answer that I often hear is, you know, what skills do they have, you know, kind of documented knowledge or completing online retention from a self-learning standpoint, you know, to show that dedication that you were able to teach yourself, you know, a new piece of technology or area of focus. So I think for you, I think it's more of figure out what excites you and then go back to, you know, how we get the employers on board. I think kind of right now for where we're at with the majority of candidates, it is kind of, you know, exposing you to kind of different areas, giving you a few resources to kind of start with. And once we narrow down that interest, you know, hopefully we'll have a better idea on where to go next.
Will someone be calling me, contacting me? Okay.
I will definitely, you know, I'm surprised no one's called you yet. I'm not sure what day you finished your assessment.
I'm not either. It's been 2, maybe 3 weeks ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hey, Lonnie, pretend like you didn't hear that.
But they may have called me. I've had surgery and I've been on pain pills. So.
Sure. Yeah, I think there was a left voicemail. Let me, Phyllis, I will follow up with you after this directly then.
So, but I am anxious to talk to somebody and see, you know, if there's anything that I can do.
And the answer is yes, there is. So we will figure that out.
All right.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you for.
I see a really good question from Matt Baker about the Amazon Web Services, the AWS Cloud Practitioner. You know, there's vouchers for the ability to take some classes and go sit for the exam to become a cloud practitioner. And Matt, your question is, does this tie to any of the categories that we've discussed today? And I will tell you that, and you can't see me because it's still got the stuff on the screen, but if you see my picture, what I'm saying is this is very accurate as to a lot of the things we're trying to introduce to each of you as candidates. There's a fundamental layer of learning about AWS cloud services. And that's in the practitioner stuff that you would learn. It's very fundamental. But from there, you can pursue cloud stuff relative to being a developer, a cloud developer, a cloud analyst, which is kind of data analytics and data analyst, or even cyber. So all three of those pathways can be influenced by the fact that you took the AWS Cloud Practitioner certification. So really good question. We do offer that at ACDS. We haven't necessarily made that as prevalent right out of the chute with some of this particular training, but it doesn't preclude that that can't become part of your profile if that sounds interesting to you. And so Ashley, we can be responsive to that, because that really falls into some additional fundamental, platform related training. So we can work with you on that, Matt.
All right, and a question from Karen. She asked, what happens after you have taken the assessment? So Karen, you should have received an email that outlines some of the training resources available. I will follow up with you directly to confirm that went out, and if not, I will get it to your inbox.
This has been very engaging. Very good.
All right. Well, we are two minutes after. Thank you again for everyone that attended. We will be following up with the slide deck and additional resources that can hopefully kickstart your career in information technology in the great state of Arkansas. Thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.